Welcome to Coach's Corner with Justin and Ethan. I'm Coach Justin.
And I'm Coach Ethan.
And we are veteran coaches with over 20 years experience in the game. We've worked with people one-on-one, online. We've owned gyms. We have studios. We've ran the gamut, I think, of working with people in real applicable situations.
Yes.
To help them optimize their health, build muscle, burn fat. So I feel like, we might have a few things to say here.
We try to help people live better lives.
Yeah, in terms of what we do. So today we're going to be talking about stress. Cortisol. We kind of link those two together. It is a stress hormone, so we'll dig into that a little bit more. Different types of stress.
Yep.
Does stress affect fat gain, muscle loss?
Yep.
Will it kill you?
Mood, anxiety, depression.
Why do we experience stress? Should we just avoid it altogether, or is there maybe there's a little benefit
There
to
could
it?
be, I think.
There might be something to this whole million years of evolution that we have. So that's what we're gonna be chatting about today, and I think it's an interesting topic because I like to kick this off with stress is subjective.
Yes.
And it's that old adage that it's not what happens to you in life, it's how you deal with it. And when we talk about stress, quote unquote, really what we're talking about is how do you respond to a perceived stress?
Yes.
Case in point, let's say you're in a car and you're running late. So you're already heightened. You're already in a heightened state.
You're already stressed out.
Running late and there's traffic. It couldn't get any worse until someone doesn't let you in. You're trying to merge and they don't let you in.
Yes.
Oh, that's it. I can't take it anymore. I lam at home. I flip this person off. I'm essentially creating that hormonal response to a very benign situation, but I'm interpreting this as stressful and then releasing the stress hormones and allowing this cascade of cause and effect to happen because of my interpretation of stress. So
you're throwing gasoline on a fire.
Yes.
The fire might be there a little bit, but then you're just throwing gas on it based on your reaction.
Versus, hey, I'm running late. Text the boss. I'm gonna be 5 minutes late, man. Sorry. Or I'm gonna be 5 minutes late to the next meeting.
And then you're fired.
And then and then you just go, great, I'll go home and relax.
And relax.
And that's how you can deal with stress. No, or you just accept it. You just kind of have that moment of awareness.
Yep.
Take a deep breath in. It is what it is. The person doesn't let you in. Sure, why not? Par for the course. Be present, and now that exact same situation interpreted differently is not so stressful anymore. So that's one of the things I like to always keep in mind when we think of stress is that it's so much of how we see things and deal with it versus what the actual situation is. But that's
it's I think the learning to respond versus react.
Totally.
Right. To me, response meaning some type of an intentional lens between the thing that's happening and your internal state versus reaction is mindless. It's just a knee-jerk, uncontrolled, no intentionality.
Totally. And it's also a learned behavior.
Absolutely.
For better or for worse. It's a feedback loop. And so the more that I allow myself to blow a gasket in that scenario, then the easier the next gasket is going to blow because I'm just shortening the distance between stimulus and response, and all I am is just a bundled, tightly wound ball of reaction.
Right, and the tighter you are, the more you're going to react, the harder it is to respond.
Yeah.
And so often I also find that the fear is almost always worse than the thing itself. Mm-hmm. The anticipation, the you get a letter in the mail from the IRS. Mm-hmm. You don't want to open it,
right?
And then you open it, and you're just like, it's a benign letter that doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah, you just owe $100,000.
Yeah, no big deal. Yeah,
just let it go.
Yeah,
write a check and be done with it.
Or even having a talk with somebody. The anticipatory fear is often I find for me more stressful than the thing I normally have to do with. I have all this work to do. Yeah, it might take some work. It might be a little sweaty palms, but I think that anticipation of the difficulty is almost always worse.
Versus procrastinating on the work. And then now we've switched it from an acute stress to a chronic stress.
Yeah,
so
because the fear is worse. Procrastination is not laziness. They say it's actually an adaptive response to fear and stress and ADHD and all these things. Right? Mm-hmm. It's a way of controlling the thing that is perceived as stressful or
the
negative.
irony, though, is that when you actually do the work, and you do the thing that you've been avoiding,
Yeah.
not only do you like feel a sense of accomplishment that gets you like that dopamine hit where now you're like, look at me, I'm a beast, I can do anything.
Yep.
But then it also, the next time you face a potential stressful situation, you now have created a framework to process it faster because you know what the outcome is going to be. And I think it's very analogous to like exercise in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, you know, it's
like
words out of my mouth next.
Right, yeah, you know, it's like we all sit there and try to talk ourselves out of that hard workout before we do it. Oh, I didn't sleep well. Maybe I deserve a day off.
It's gonna be hard.
I'm still sore from last time.
Yeah, I don't have any energy. Yeah. I'm not seeing results. The fear is always worse than the thing itself.
Right. But then, so kind of taking this like on a macro view, the more you do that and the more you procrastinate on hard things, let's just take exercise as an example, then the irony is that instead of just subjecting yourself to that acute stress of the workout and then adapting to the stress and then making it less stressful the next time you do it, you procrastinate, and now you've essentially put yourself in a state of chronic stress because you're always stressed out about the next one, and you keep procrastinating, and then skipping that workout then leads to being weaker, less resiliency in your heart and your
more
cardiovascular system.
Next
and so
time.
now there's like systemic stress, not just psychological stress. And so it's like the takeaway is you have to just jump into the acute stress right now in the moment so that you can arm yourself and protect yourself against the chronic stress.
Yep, because the acute stress, not a bad thing. Chronic stress, though, oof.
Yeah.
That's what's going to get you.
That'll get you.
So stress, you know, as defined medically, very as the divine definition, very complicated, but just, you know, strenuating physical, mental, or emotional circumstances. Huh. It was a deep one.
Extenuating circumstances.
And I think most of the time when you look up like what stress is, it often is focused on the mental emotional component. Mm-hmm. But physical stress also falls into that category, like exercise. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think that's important to remember. I was actually talking with the client. I was talking about adaptogens basically making, you know, your ability to deal with stress easier. And she's like, well, how do they help you with mental and emotional stress? And I'm like, well, I think it's more points towards physical stress. Not that I don't think they couldn't help with that, but she was like, but that doesn't count as stress. And I was like, oh, but it does.
Physical stress, yeah.
Like it's, I think the zeitgeist is so much that it's mental and emotional. You know, I'm stressed because of work, or I'm stressed because of my relationship, or I'm stressed because of my financial situation. And those are all forms of stress, no doubt. Mm-hmm. But I also think a crushingly hard workout or a beastly sprint or something of that nature is stress. And then
but the more you interpret your life circumstances as stressful, and the more you identify with someone who is stressed because of circumstances, then the harder it is to then subject yourself to physical stress in the form of exercise because you're so exhausted from the perceived circumstantial stress. Yep. And this is, I think, where, you know, you get into like a mindset conversation of just like, what if you reframed the stress to a challenge? And it's like, listen, if you're in a financial situation, you can almost kind of look at it as like, listen, objectively, it's hard. Anybody goes through these kind of things in life. They are hard.
They definitely are hard.
On the other hand, though, it's like that is your task then to overcome so that you can free yourself from that stress. Otherwise, if you don't rise to the challenge in that aspect, then essentially you're just allowing this stress to take over, right? And thankfully we live in a country where there is upward mobility if you work hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard somebody describe it as every obstacle is really an opportunity.
Totally.
Because I think even challenge has I think there's a certain grit and rise to the challenge, but opportunity is, you know, if you're overweight, you're an opportunity to lose weight and get healthy. If you're broke, you have this opportunity to be unbroke. You know, if your relationship's not doing well, you have an opportunity to fix your relationship. And it's just that mindset change. It's very, you know, same thing, just different language, same, but different.
It's just like being in control and like, you know, I realized we got about 40 good years. Anything below 20, you're kind of a kid. Anything over 60, you're kind of a senior. Not to say you can't live a full active life beyond that, but let's just say you got from 20 to 60, really like master your domain, identify these holes in your life from the big three: finance, relationships, and health.
And health, yeah.
And you can look at that as like, okay, I'm a victim of circumstance, and that can be the cocoon that you create around yourself and never, want to break out of that. Or you can say, like you said, these are the opportunities for me to ascend and to allow myself to become the version that I say I want to be, and that when I close my eyes, I see myself as, but then I have to bridge that gap between how I think and feel versus what the reality of my situation is. And that bridging of the gap can be stressful, but it's like tolerating that stress and that frustration is your rite of passage, is your sort of gauntlet you have to go through in order to then ascend to a life that maybe isn't so stressful anymore.
Yeah.
But you did it in a way where you had to go through it. And so when you do arrive at this newer version of yourself that maybe isn't so stressful anymore, you can always appreciate the harder times because it's what you had to go through to accomplish that. And so it's so powerful if you embrace stress as an opportunity.
As
like
an opportunity.
Said.
And I want to say, like, it's easier said than done. It's not as simple as just like, oh, well, I'll just like approach the stressful situations in my life and I'll just overcome them. It'll be great. But what I do want to say is that just like exercise, it gets easier every time. So, I think having a little expectation of that, it will be challenging. It might feel extra stressful in that moment, but that every time you step up to bat, it's going to get a little easier. It's going to get a little more manageable and eventually be on the other side. Just like exercise, walking to the gym, you're lost, don't know what's going on. You feel like you don't know what you're doing. It's hard. Form sucks. But every time you show up, it's going to get a little better. Next thing you know, you're a Greek god.
Next thing you know, you look like Ethan.
Back when I was 27. Okay.
But it's those feedback. And the opposite's also true, where the more you procrastinate on that, the more you delay that, then every time you do go back, you just feel like you've been hit by the same truck over and over and over again, because instead of going 3 times a week, you go once every 10 days after you go through this like emotional roller coaster and finally convince yourself to go again. And then you just get, it's so hard, and you're just like, it's
just as sore.
Yeah.
Because if you wait that long, you're going to get just as sore. You're going to get discouraged. You're not going to get familiar with your gym and your exercises. It's going to stay foreign. So, yeah.
So have you heard of the hierarchy of competence?
I have.
So I always talk to our new clients about the hierarchy of competence. And so at the bottom of the hierarchy is unconscious incompetence.
Yep.
You don't know what you don't know.
You're doing it wrong, and you don't even know you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, you don't even know. Those people who are just like, like they're 300 pounds and they think they need to lose maybe 3 or 4 pounds off their midsection. It's like, well, you need a life change.
Or you walk into the gym and you see people just butchering an exercise or using machine completely incorrectly, but they're like, I
don't need to train legs. I wear pants. Like, you don't even know what you don't know, right?
Yep.
And then the next level up on the hierarchy of competence is conscious incompetence. So it's unconscious incompetence, and then it's conscious incompetence. And that's sort of where most people will come to us, where they finally are conscious of their incompetency.
Yes, they're aware. They are aware. They've gotten enough knowledge to know they're still doing it wrong.
They've had the come to Jesus moment, and that's when they probably feel very stressed out. Like, oh my God, I've been doing it wrong my whole life.
Yep.
Oh, I need help. And that's where like the frustration sets in, and oh no. And then the next level from conscious incompetence is conscious competence.
Yep.
In other words, as long as you're paying attention and you're focused, and you need a daily system to stay consistent. But as long as you're focused, you're competent.
You've gained another layer of knowledge to do the thing correctly.
Think of it as like intermediacy.
Yeah, but you gotta be present with it. But you have acquired the skill set to do a squat correctly.
Yep.
And but you got to pay attention to every time you do the squat.
Yep.
You have to think about it. Oh, got to push my knees out, hips back. All that stuff has to be consciously aware of it. But you're actually performing properly.
And this is where the stress starts to alleviate a little bit. And we're talking like skill acquisition, which is essentially a metaphor for life, because life is essentially just a endless succession of us ascending and breaking our belief systems and acquiring new skills to become a better version of ourselves. So we get to conscious competency It can be workouts. It can be understanding nutrition. Finally, as soon as you take your eye off that ball,
learning software. Anything. It really is anything.
But that's when the stress starts to finally subside, as long as you're in control. And then the highest level is unconscious competency. So think of it as like we're speaking English right now. I don't know the next word I'm about to say until I say it, because there's just a fluency. There's like a unconscious competency.
Yeah, you've spoken English your whole life.
I can do it in my sleep.
Yeah,
right?
it's just you've mastered it in some capacity.
Yeah.
It's not like a foreign language that you might be able to speak, but you have to think about it every time.
Yeah,
think about every word. It's just good, and you can do it. You can slice a carrot. You can julienne a carrot without even having to think twice. You can be having a full-on conversation over there, and you're just slicing and dicing or whatever it is. Yeah,
you might be unconsciously competent. Cooking,
laying bricks, writing, and then be a unconscious incompetent at nutrition or exercise or whatever, right? Or communication skills.
And so that's the journey that we all have to kind of go through, and that can even be, I think, you can even use that as like presence, self-awareness too. You could be unconsciously and competently self-aware. And you don't even know that you're just blowing up every time you get behind that wheel, and you're just flipping people off, and you're cutting people, and you're just you're a menace to society.
And you're stressed
in that capacity, and you're causing stress.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the journey of skill acquisition, and I think that's just a good framework to look at anything on, and just create some awareness around. Okay, where am I on these different things that are important to me, and giving yourself that permission to ascend and acquire and become aware of your choices, so that way you don't unnecessarily cause stress.
More stress, deal with the stressful
interpret situations as stressful when really they're just a rite of passage you have to go through to be a better person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the physiology of stress a little bit here, right? So fundamentally, we have two you can think about as two sides to our nervous system, right? We've got the sympathetic nervous system, and that's your fight or flight. Fundamentally, that's where your fight or flight comes from, as I'm sure everybody's heard. And then we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is to be considered homeostasis. That's the rest, digest. You want to procreate and get down.
I was thinking of how rest, digest, and...
Yeah, I know. So it's a hard one.
I was trying to say something funny about...
Rest, digest, and have sex.
Rest, digest, and... just sex.
And just sex, yeah. So that fight or flight was really meant for acute stressful situations. The cliche is like being chased by a bear or a tiger back in the day. Or, a warring tribe tries to come and steal your food. Or, a tornado happens, or a flood happens, or a forest fire happens. Like something that is acutely stressful that comes, and you got to do something about it. It's time to move. Time to make it happen. And
it's an amazing evolutionary process. I mean, people think that cortisol should be avoided at all costs, and cortisol is fantastic. Cortisol is
essential.
One of the most interesting processes in our body, the most interesting hormone in our
that
body.
hormone literally affects every system: your immune system, your nervous system, your musculoskeletal system, your everything, your digestive system. It's incredible. It has,
with great power comes great responsibility.
That is true.
And so, although it's super important for all those things, think of it as like when we are in this fight or flight scenario, this is how I'm going to try to highlight how important this hormone is. So let's say you're walking down the street, it's dark, and you see someone approaching you, and you just get that instant, I know I'm about to get mugged right now.
Yep.
I see this person is saying, this is not good. Your spidey senses start going off. That's 2 Spider-Man references, by the way, in case anyone's counting. And I've never even seen the movie. But your spidey senses start going off. Okay, this is bad. So you can either turn around and run.
Yep.
Or you can face the assailant.
Yes.
Right? So let's just say you turn around and run, and there's someone else there, and you're boxed in. You have to engage. So what's happening in that moment? Cortisol is a stress hormone that actually is a catabolic steroid. And so in a second, it starts to mobilize fuel. It starts to release glucose into your bloodstream immediately so that, A, you can think really clearly in that moment, whether you have food in your system or not.
Yeah, exactly.
B, it starts to dilate your capillaries and bring blood to your extremities so you can fight or run. And then the downside or the good side, depending on how you look at it, is it shuts down non-vital functions. Because if you're scrapping with someone who's trying to mug you, you don't need to be working on digestion and reproductive organs now. You need to be like swinging and completely going.
It's time for battle.
Vision. Yeah, it's time for battle.
Yep.
So that's why this is so freaking important and so interesting from just an evolutionary standpoint.
Well, it's actually really interesting. So cortisol is released from the adrenal glands, which is one of our endocrine organs. And the actual order of it is like, so first you get the adrenaline, which is like your super syringe of crack power. You know, you got the grandma lifting up the car to save the baby. You know, it's a super crazy hormone that just does basically everything Justin was just talking about, but more acutely, but it's very short acting. And one of the things I was reading is that cortisol is left as a hormone that trickles out after the adrenaline subsides, because adrenaline is short acting, so that you can maintain your alertness and all of that for a longer period of time. So let's just say you did just run from the tiger and you got away. Your adrenaline starts to subside because you just finished your sprint, but you don't know if the tiger's still around. And so there's a prolonged sense of hyper alertness that's not quite as intense as the adrenaline spike, but is more so than just homeostatic. You know, I'm chilling back at the cave with no issue, so that you can maintain the alertness for a longer period of time than what the adrenaline has to offer.
Yeah, and we can all like relate where if we've ever had to run from something.
Yeah.
Or we've ever like had like a crazy.
You almost get hit by a car.
Yeah. It's not like right away you're like, okay, we're good. So anyways, lunch. It's like, whoa, and you're just kind of looking around and okay, yeah, and you keep looking over your shoulder. It's like that's what you're talking about. It's just this prolonged vigilance that your body has. Yeah. So amazing, powerful stuff that has probably been a big part of our evolution.
Why we're still around.
Yeah, why we're still here.
But the thing is like in our modern day culture, we're not being really chased by wild animals. We generally are protected from extreme weather events, for the most part. And so stress has kind of become something that is less acute in intensity and has something become more prolonged, especially with our current day lifestyle of like jobs, driving, traffic. I mean, I think we can all relate that traffic is stressful, but it's not really like something's coming to kill you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this, like I got to sit in the fucking 405 for an hour and I don't want to do this. And this is a frustrating stop, go.
Which goes back to the circumstantial of just like, how are we perceiving this?
Yes. And that's where the problem is, right? So this evolutionary response, fight or flight, it's great. But fundamentally, we are supposed to be staying in our parasympathetic or our rest, digest, our homeostasis. That's where we're supposed to, the bedrock of where we're supposed to live. And then we have acute moments of stressful responses. All right, it's time to go give the presentation to the boss. Okay, shut down all those other functions, get a little adrenaline, get a little sharper, think a little better. But then what happens is that, especially in modern day life, and I would say especially in urban environments,
definitely,
there's just just the fact that there's billboards and lights and traffic and people everywhere,
higher and more expectations too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. We were a bit happy, versus somebody that lives in the country, step outside on your porch, you got the wind blowing in the trees and not have a neighbor for a couple miles. Generally a more relaxed environment. And so what happens is we get into this perpetual low level chronic fight or flight or stressful state. And I think that's where shit hits the fan. That's where things spiral. You start to spiral out. This is where cortisol gets its negative reputation because when we're exposed to it for a long time, bad things happen.
Yeah, and one of the conceptions out there is that cortisol will make you fat or make you gain weight, and actually that's not true. It might redistribute your weight because of breaking down tissue, mobilizing fuel through glucose, and then combine that with maybe someone who's not channeling their energy through exercise, it could cause like visceral body fat, fatty liver, and then where you get that kind of stress belly that we've all heard.
Oh, yeah.
Middle management, where you got pressure on both ends and everyone's, breathing down your neck to perform. and you're just constantly stressed out at work, pulling your hair out, trying to get things done on time. And
you're a single parent running around with kids.
Yeah, there's just never enough time in the day. Then you start sleeping less because you gotta make a trade-off somewhere, and then that makes you want to decompress with drinking probably too much. And then there's no time to make healthy food, so you just eat processed, quick grab-and-go food, and so then it's just this spiral cascade of all these things are stressors. And then you roll it all up into one life experience, and then it's just very, it's fertile grounds for chronic cortisol, which then could lead to that classic look of skinny arms and a pot belly.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because it's like if you look at the acute effects of cortisol, it decreases inflammation, it regulates your blood sugar, it regulates your blood pressure as well.
Yep.
The issue is that it's kind of like stressful on your body. It's like imagine you're putting nitrous in your tank, or you're revving your engine on the red line because you got a situation that requires it. Once in a while, it might not be that bad, but if you do that all the time, it's actually very stressful on the body. Yeah. And so when you have prolonged cortisol in the blood, it then increases blood pressure. Yep. Increases inflammation.
Yeah, your heart's just slightly elevated. Your heart rate's just slightly elevated.
It's just wearing you down. And one of the very interesting things, and so cortisol is kind of like the antithesis to insulin, right? So insulin takes blood,
anabolic hormone.
Yeah, it removes blood or sugar from the blood, stores it in the muscles, gets it going, and basically takes that blood sugar down. Whereas obviously, as we just talked about, cortisol brings sugar into the blood, so it's readily available to use for your muscles and your brain. And one of the potentials of prolonged cortisol exposure is that it can lead to diabetes because you have elevated blood sugar all the time. And as we know, spikes in blood sugar are fine. There's a crazy fad going around right now about
glucose
monitors, and oh my God, I ate something and my blood sugar went up. Look at that.
Look at this. I ate carbs, my blood sugar went up.
Oh my God, it's not like we don't have the processes to deal with that.
Yeah.
So reminder that spikes in your blood sugar are actually not a bad thing, completely normal. So if you eat a piece of bread or you have some rice and your blood sugar spikes for a moment, not a big deal. It's the prolonged exposure to blood sugars that are the issue.
Just like spike in cortisol is not bad.
Exactly.
And in fact, quite good for you in acute scenarios. It's just the prolonged exposure to cortisol that's bad.
And so it's like when you're chronically stressed, one of the things, and we all know diabetes is not a good thing, but you can actually develop diabetes from prolonged stress. And it's wild. You look at the symptoms of chronic stress, and it's basically everything bad. I mean, I got a list: aches and pains, chest pain, exhaustion, trouble sleeping, headaches, dizziness, shaking, high blood pressure, jaw clenching and muscle tension, digestive issues, trouble having sex, and a weakened immune system. Basically from just being stressed chronically, right? So that whole...
I think anybody in middleman, just a stressful job probably can all relate to at least half of those symptoms, right?
Yep. And those are just physical. And then it also leads to, irritability and anxiety, depression, panic attacks, and sadness, right? So your whole system basically just gets crushed if you're chronically stressed. And I think that's why the first part of that conversation we had was so important about just a general, I think, process or strategy to approach life and the stressful situations in life. And we'll talk about some actual things and activities you can do that are pretty cliche, but are there to help stress on a day-to-day level and ways you can prevent it. But I think that mind frame, the how, not the what, is so important, because if we can participate with that whole part of the conversation we had, we can reduce our daily stress, not be chronically stressed, and not basically fall apart at the seams in every aspect of our being.
So it's just that ancient wisdom of it's not what happens, it's how you deal with it.
Right, and because the most typical ways that people look to deal with stress are all this bad shit: drinking, smoking, drugs, gambling,
social media,
hyperactivity, compulsive sex, shopping, compulsive internet browsing, overeating. Porn. Yeah, exactly. So all these things, which I'm not going to say that, altered states of consciousness are the worst, or, going out and throwing a couple chips down the roulette table here and there. Again, like if you're winning
acute
Rome,
versus chronic,
it's all that acute versus chronic.
Are you doing it every day?
Yes.
Or every week, or is it like the occasional indulgence?
Absolutely. So it's one of those things that we often just instinctually go to the quick fix and the patch because it works. You have a drink from a day when you get stressed, when it's a stressful day when you get home. It makes you feel a little better.
Feel good. But then, you keep it up, and eventually that becomes a new stressor unto itself.
Absolutely.
Which just continues to just pile on top of everything else in your life until you have a fucking panic attack.
Yep.
Or,
Absolutely.
So, looking at the long term here.
And I would say, like, a good thing just because, is when you engage with drinking, substances, gambling, whatever, is it there to celebrate life or run away from life? And I think, obviously you can look at that gambling's just not good, period, shouldn't do it, or whatever it is. But I also think that life is about how you approach it. And I think that that's just a nice lens that you can ask yourself of, like, am I participating with this thing in this moment as an escape, or am I celebrating? And
then one layer deeper to that point is, if it is indeed, if you're being honest with yourself and it is an escape, well, then the work then is now to create a life that you don't feel like you need to escape from.
Exactly, which goes back to that stuff in the beginning.
Get healthy, eat better, feel confident in yourself, look for a new job.
Work through the trouble in your relationship.
Create the opportunities in disguise through these perceived stressors, and then elevate your game so that way you don't have to feel like you run away. So then when you do imbibe on a drink or whatever, you are celebrating, you're not escaping.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. So then I think we've laid the groundwork pretty well for stress and the physiological effect of that. And so I would like to just talk a little bit about, like, why we want to expose ourselves to stress via the exercise, maybe calorie deficit that might feel stressful for some people, so that we can better arm ourselves for chronic stress and just kind of almost like, the dose, the poison is the dose, right?
Absolutely.
And when you look at ecosystems, and I think that we can, like, our body is an ecosystem, but let's take like a stream, for example, or a creek. What they find is actually sometimes when creeks are introduced to, like, a toxin acutely, the entire ecosystem adapts more robustly. And so if there's ever like a sewage spill or toxic something, what they find is as long as it's not chronic and like wipe out the entire, a life form there, but it's just like an exposure, the creeks recover and adapt stronger.
Interesting.
And because they're exposed to stress, they adapt to the stress response, and then they could become more resilient. And so our bodies are the same and our minds are the same. And so this is why exercise is so important from a stress response standpoint in managing it. And so we are quite literally, when you walk into a squat rack and you put that barbell on your back and you lower yourself down and you feel a burn and you feel you're lightheaded and you feel your eyes are bulging out of your head as you stand up from that squat, hands down, that is a stressful situation. And in fact, interesting study, they found that the way you can tell how effective a workout is how much cortisol it was released. And so way better than growth hormone, way better than testosterone levels in your blood, it's how much cortisol you released in that workout. That's is way more indicative of the efficacy of that workout. And so you will adapt and overcome from that intense, stressful workout much better, indicated by how much cortisol is in your blood, which is super interesting, and why getting your butt in the gym is probably the bedrock of any stress management
without
protocol.
Question. Yeah, and it's dual fold, because when you introduce those acute cortisol spikes, it actually helps to regulate cortisol any other time. So if you are battling chronic stress and have chronic cortisol release, those acute spikes actually, physiologically speaking, help you to regulate them better. And it's for a fact that exercise is one of the best medicines for depression and anxiety. It's just between the physiological functions and releasing the stress. Like, even a short walk can change your mood so very much. And so, it's for me, that there is the dual fold of, it's our bodies and our physiology and it's our hormones, but it is also our state of well-being, our mental and emotional states, which are all, linked.
I mean, you want to stave off Alzheimer's, you want to stave off hypertension, you want to stave off diabetes, you want to stave off depression and anxiety. What's the one thing that almost is universally accepted is moderate to rigorous exercise done consistently by maybe minimum 2 or 3 times a week, at most maybe 5. But, like, that's it. That's kind of it. I think it puts you in the moment, which is incredibly helpful from a ancient philosophy standpoint of just being present. There's something just where you can detach from your normal life when you engage your body. And so it's like engaging your physicality gets you out of your brain where you're overthinking and analyzing and criticizing everything, and just puts you present for a second.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like the dichotomy of allowing yourself to be stressed so that you don't suffer from the negative consequences of stress.
Yeah. It's stressful if
it's stressful being stressed.
It's stressful it's stressful when you're stressed about being stressed.
Yeah, but
but getting diabetes is stressful.
Yeah.
Right? Becoming fat and your joints hurting is stressful.
Yeah, you think it's stressful to have to restrict your calories? Wait until you have to inject insulin in your body every day.
Yeah.
That would be stressful.
And there's so many other strategies too, I think, in the mindset kind of a thing. Like one of them that I thought was pretty straightforward is that, like, at the end of the day, focus on the things that you have accomplished versus what you didn't accomplish. There might be a long list of things you didn't do, but just putting that awareness on something you did do, a little positive reinforcement, makes you feel a little better. And other things that are simple, like planning, like creating plans, which kind of goes back to the whole conversation of how to approach your life. But planning makes you feel more in control, gives you a game plan, and then you can execute and you can start to dance with the stress on purpose and intentionally.
I always tell clients, engage in your life, right? So you want to go to dinner, go out to dinner. You want to grab a drink with a friend, grab a drink with a friend. Do the weekend getaway with your spouse. Like, have fun. You can't avoid these things in life just because you're trying to achieve health, right? Because you're sacrificing one thing that's equally as important as the other. But there's a framework we have to operate in, because in the past it was, I'm just gonna go in there and just see what happens. We're just gonna go to a restaurant starving, we have no idea what we're gonna eat, we're just gonna hope for the best, and that's the trap. So to your point, planning, what we'd say is don't go in blind and don't go in hungry. Right. So in that scenario, if we're going to go to a restaurant, look at the menu ahead of time. How much more stress-free would your experience be if you are trying to lose some body fat? And you've worked really hard in the gym, and these restaurant dates or occasions with your friends have always been sort of the trigger that leads to overeating and overdrinking and whatever. How much less stressful would it be if you just took 5 minutes, browsed the menu before you went to the restaurant, decided ahead of time, I'm going to order this, and this, made it fit into your meal plan for the day, allowed yourself 2 or even 3 drinks, so everything's good.
It's all
and
in there.
You can come sit there, you can have a game plan, you can just enjoy your time. And then one little hack I'll give you guys here, drink a protein shake before you go to dinner. If you're struggling and you want to lose body fat, you want to lose a little bit of weight, you want to going out a heavy, huge dinner with drinks and is not going to accelerate the process. If you just put a protein shake in before you go, you'll feel satiated. You can sit there. You're not sitting there just waiting for the food to come.
It'll be easier to make those decisions, right?
And that's a form of just de-stressing. It's just thinking ahead, planning, anticipating what the pitfall could be, and then getting just a rough parameter that you can operate in, so you can finish that night, lay your head on the pillow, and be like, "Oh, that was successful. Proud of myself."
It's good, and it's there's all the cliches are there for stress relief. Yoga, laughter's a big one. I was doing research, and they were just like, having the ability to be able to laugh at life and laugh at your friends is a huge way to combat stress, because you're just not taking it so seriously. It's almost like laughing at the things you can't control. And obviously, like, practicing gratitude is another big one that I saw.
Gratitude's huge.
But one of the things I wanted to talk about, which I really emphasize, is that breath, I think, is probably one of the greatest tools for stress management. It is something that we can do and have control over, and it basically is direct participation with your nervous system. So going back to that parasympathetic nervous system, the homeostasis, the relaxed, your breath is basically a direct communication line that you can intentionally participate to bring that homeostasis on. And there's a key thing. One, you got to get into diaphragmatic or belly breathing. You got to learn how to pull the breath down versus that top lung breathing.
So when you breathe in, your belly should be extending out.
Yes, you push the belly out with the breath in. And there's two things, is that one, when your exhale becomes longer than your inhale, that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And interestingly enough, there are actually nerves that innervate the lower lobes of the lung that are only inflated when you do a diaphragmatic or belly breath, that are actually directly associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. You know, so the whole idea of like take a deep breath to calm down is not just like a presence and a mindfulness activity, but it's physiologically linked to the nervous system and the body. So when you inflate those lower lobes, those nerves get innervated and you start to reduce your cortisol, reduce your heart rate, reduce your blood pressure. And trust me, when you're stressed or you're having a panic attack, it is one of the hardest things to do to choose to take a deep breath.
Just reach for that paper bag.
Exactly. I mean, I had an ex that used to have very acute, very intense panic attacks. And even though it was the hardest thing for her to do, I would sit there and like, I guess coach her, but like be like, let's find the breath. And even though in that moment, it feels impossible. It's like, fuck, it's the last thing I want to do is take a deep breath right now. I'm fucking pissed. I'm annoyed. I got cut off on the way here. I got, get whatever it is. But let me tell you, if you can just drop in and do the thing that we do all the time and just take a deep breath, it is a magical, magical way. And again, so just breathe deep, get your inhale or your exhale longer than your inhale. And it is like magic sauce.
It's so powerful. And even just not even waiting until you're stressed, but just creating like a ritual around that in the morning before the day starts going, before you start putting out fires and just fixing emergencies, just taking that, like I'll set a 3-minute timer when I'm good. I don't always remember, but I try. Just a 3-minute timer on my phone and just sit there and do like box breathing or extended exhale breathing or any sort of just presence with I can just breathe for 3 minutes. And then it just like kind of sets the tone. It almost like it allows for just like a buffer, like a resiliency, so that when you do find yourself in that traffic jam and you're running late, you're already in a state of presence. You didn't start the day already stressed, but you allowed yourself to kind of get back to baseline.
You got into that homeostasis. I used to have a practice same, and we're not perfect.
Believe it or not, guys. even coaches corner with Justin and Ethan are not perfect.
But I used to have I was pretty good about it for a very long time, that every red light I would just use as an opportunity. I had created a habit.
I do that, but with Instagram Reels. So every red light, I try to just at least watch one.
Trust me, but there was a while where I would just use that as an opportunity to just take a few deep breaths, even just 3. And what they've actually found is that it might take 2 minutes or 3 minutes to create a state of homeostasis or to bring you closer to do that. But just like anything else that once practiced, they found that 3 quality breaths can flip you back into homeostasis. So, and what I would say to the folks out there, when you're doing that exhale, is to just look for like a sinking or a dropping feeling, almost like a surrender. I know it's not like maybe the best word.
Just feel your physiology.
But it's like literally like a melt. You can feel the sink, and it's just an incredible. And so I think if it's like the skill set of being aware of that and attaching to that sensation, 3 breaths can change it.
I love when like science catches up with just ancient philosophy and wisdom from thousands of years ago, and we're like, oh yeah, that's true.
It's funny you say that, because there's this thing called the vagus nerve. Let's dive in even deeper. No, it's really incredible. It's a very unique nerve in the body because it innervates from the brain and attaches to every organ. And it's the only nerve that actually sends information from your organs back to your brain. So outside of like your motor system, your movement system, and your spine, having a proprioception of where the dumbbell is and sending that information to your brain, your brain is an outward signal only. It tells your organs what to do, tells your endocrine system what to do. It's always outward. But the vagus nerve actually brings communication from your organs back to your brain. So it's kind of like this very enigmatic nerve. They're finding out a lot more about it. But activating it is one of the ways that is basically all associated with, again, that homeostasis or parasympathetic nervous system. And it's really interesting because in some people, they actually have like almost like what would be like a little pacemaker that they put in that's used to innervate the nerve for, it would be in extreme cases of PTSD and chronic depression. But there are now ways that you can stimulate the nerve that are basically non-invasive. And that goes all the way from manipulation, like massage and physical manipulation. And there are also now a lot of technologies coming out that are using either electrical impulse or vibration for the purpose of stimulating the vagus nerve. And so one of the things, for example, is that it basically comes out from like right where the ears are and goes down the side of the neck on both sides. And so by basically manipulating the cartilage just above your earlobe and the cartilage of your inner ear, like literally you just stick your finger in your ear and like gently rotate your finger away, actually stimulates the vagus nerve. Oh, wow. You know, and it might seem ridiculous, but it's factual. And so, you know, it's just interesting because there's more and more tools that we can use that if we become aware of them that are simple and accessible that can really help to regulate our stress. You know, and I think, you know, I actually got one of these things and it's like a vibrating pebble. So there's a bundle of the vagal nerves right at your sternum. And so it's this thing that vibrates at like different frequencies and rates, and you just either hang with it or like around your neck like a necklace, or you lay down with it and you just put it right on your sternum. And it's associated with like, they have like nice soft music, but basically it just vibrating brings you to that state. And let me tell you, I got one and it is powerful. It's really powerful. And so, you know, I bring this up because I think a lot of us are stressed out there. We just talked about all the terrible things that it can do. I think sometimes life just gives a stressful situation. Like again, if you're a single parent, or you have a high stress job. And so just, I think becoming aware of a couple modalities that you can do to help regulate your stress can really just go a very long way. And in that study, I found the study that basically vagal nerve basically helped tremendously with PTSD and chronic stress. And so, you know, there's science behind it. It's not just like the yoga blog.
Right. No, I'm sure. And yeah. I mean, I think that like, as with anything in life, we have to kind of find our way. And getting something that can stimulate or just understanding the vagal nerve system, getting some breath work, adopting a movement routine, practicing journaling, practicing present awareness,
seeing a therapist.
Yeah, like all of them, a combination, experiment, find your way, ascend the hierarchy of competence in your ability to create a skill around your own self-awareness and stress management, and understand that like acute stress is necessary for adaptation. We can't evolve if we're never stressed. We can't avoid stress.
Yes.
But it's understanding how we respond to it and developing those frameworks like, you know, a morning breath routine, an evening vagal nerve stimulation, a process that you go through when you are going to go out to dinner, you look at the menu, like these little systems that we create for ourselves.
Go on a walk.
Protect us from unnecessary stress that we quote unquote didn't see coming when we could have just spent that moment preparing and averted disaster, averted another stressful scenario that just kind of puts us deeper into the hole of insecurity, lack of fitness, metabolic issues that are associated with that. Yeah. So, man, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It really is. And it's just about getting ahead of it, being the master of your domain and trying to improve, you know, through awareness.
Yeah, I actually got a different one that's like an electrical impulse one that you put on the side of your neck. I'm waiting for it to come.
He's all about it.
Well, I'm curious. So, I mean, because here's the thing. I think sometimes if you are chronically anxious or you're severely depressed, sometimes stepping into behaviors is difficult. Yeah. Right? Even taking the deep breath. And so for me, there's a component, and I don't necessarily fall into either of those categories, but look, I've got anxiety, I've got stress, I've battled with depression. And so for me, it's almost a component of like, if I can hack it, if I can be like, man, I don't really want to do anything, but if I can just like stick this thing on the side of my neck and physiologically biohack my way,
your foot in the door.
Yeah. And then maybe, I'm not saying it's just going to cure any of it, but maybe I get calm enough or it helps enough that maybe I will go to the gym. Yeah. Or maybe I will finally read through my emails if I'm anxious about it or whatever it might be.
Totally.
You know what I mean? So
totally. Yeah. Those are great hacks, great tips. Well, I think that's good. Yeah. That was a fun one. That was episode 17 already. Yeah. 17 weeks of this stuff.
Hopefully you've learned something if you find stress in your life.
I definitely learned a lot. I thought that was really informative. So
yeah.
All right. Well, guys, stay tuned for next time.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Catch you all later. Peace out.